What should we expect from JJ McCarthy and the Vikings offense in the second half of the year? That more this week on the couch. If we're starting with Vikings, we're starting with our dear friend Paul Charchian. Charch, it's here. JJ McCarthy's back. What's going to happen?
It's got to be better than it was in the first two games when JJ McCarthy played. We had 8 quarters to look at him, 7 of which were pretty bad. Now, in fairness to JJ, put in a fairly difficult spot with an offensive line that immediately got struck with a wide range of injuries, and he had the highest pressure rate in the NFL. He had a 40% pressure rate in JJ McCarthy's first 2 starts. That's not no quarterback can succeed like that. The problem is now, fast forward, here we come to week 9, and the offensive line has still got tumult to it. The starting left tackle, Christian Darrisaw, was not able to play last week. The starting left guard, Donovan Jackson, first rounder, missed a bunch of games. He's trying to come back, but he's still really, really green. The center position has been a tumult because Ryan Kelly, the starting center, has got his, I think, 5th diagnosed concussion. And the right tackle, Brian O'Neill's hurt. I mean, it's a brutal spot to put JJ McCarthy in. And this Vikings team had tried so hard to put him in a position where it was going to be as easy as possible. They wanted to do the really slow on ramp to JJ McCarthy's career. You look at the meager passing attempts that he had in weeks 1 and 2, and in no small part because they didn't want him to have to go win with his throwing shoulder. And as it turns out, that whole game plan's out the door. The Vikings defense looks bad. If it's going to be a game script, anything coming up against Detroit that is anything like what we saw against the Chargers, then the Vikings fall behind early. They don't have the luxury of running. Now you've got to pass with JJ McCarthy. Offensive line may or may not hold up, and we might have a situation that doesn't look all that dissimilar to last week when Carson Wentz, God bless him, he died on the field so that JJ McCarthy may play. And it was a gallant, noble performance by Carson Wentz to stay on the field as long as he did. Now his season is over, and this team has got, the Vikings have got the stench of death.
Yeah, they do. They do.
I hate to say it.
No, I hear you. It's funny because I the metaphor that I brought up on the show sometime earlier in the season was like when you're out in the ocean and there's something dead, it floats differently. Like you can tell, like that thing is dead. Like that animal. I shouldn't even say that thing. You know, that once soul consciousness animal has now, that soul consciousness is parted back to, a sea. I think it was like we saw a seal. Anyway, now we're getting into trauma here on the couch, but we're getting into trauma because you're right. I mean, look, I want to dissect this because it's on the couch and this is a perfect place to do this, right? Like Kevin O'Connell's vibes right now. Well, no, actually, first Carson Wentz. Hats off to Carson Wentz. Boy, he must really be grateful to this franchise, and maybe it's Kevin O'Connell because we've talked about in previous shows how Kevin O'Connell, like there's love, there's affection, there's a positivity there that maybe. Yeah. That gets that buy-in because Carson Wentz isn't a lifetime Viking or anything. And so, yeah, he was going out there playing in extreme pain just to delay the return of, I mean, maybe it was an 8-week injury. I don't think so. I don't think it was an 8-week injury, Paul. I think that Kevin O'Connell has accurately gauged that his first-round quarterback from 2024 isn't ready. Why else do you sacrifice Carson Wentz like that? The offhand joke was, well, they couldn't put Wentz out there because if they put Max Brosmer out there, we might have a quarterback controversy on our hands.
And they might.
So I mean,
that's not out of the realm of possibility.
So I mean, I have to toss out the name Brock Purdy, right? I mean, we are in the realm of possibilities, even if it's 0.1%. That's not zero. That Max Brosmer could be like Brock Purdy part 2, maybe not as good as Purdy, but he becomes the plan at some point because this is a impatient league about quarterback development.
I picked up Max Brosmer last week in my Dynasty Empire Superflex League because that is a possible pathway for the Vikings. Now, okay, I am not shoveling dirt on JJ McCarthy yet. You know, the sample size is way too small, but I do not like the situation he's been placed in for success. And I think there is a scenario where 1 month from now, We've had, and the Vikings have the hardest remaining schedule
That's the other
by
part of this
most
picture.
metrics.
Yes.
Right. And so there's you go through the schedule and you go, oh man, there's a scenario here where the Vikings lose their next 4 games. And then what do they do at quarterback? That decision could be looming for this team. They've got Detroit, Baltimore, Chicago, Green Bay, Seattle. That is it's those next 5 games are tough. 3 of them are on the road. Sig, I don't like this situation for JJ McCarthy. I'm nervous about it on all fronts. So there's that for JJ. Now, if we're worried about JJ, where does that trickle down for
Oh
his
boy.
receivers?
Yeah.
So what we saw in the first 2 weeks is a dearth of targets for Justin Jefferson. Now, Jordan Addison wasn't on the team then. You'd think Justin Jefferson would have been pelted with targets. Your first-year quarterback, first-year starting quarterback. You'd think you'd just be throwing to Justin Jefferson constantly, but through those first 2 games, he was the 37th most targeted wide receiver, Justin Jefferson. And I do worry a little bit about how much we're going to get out of Justin Jefferson in this new situation. Now, defense is terrible. They might be passing a lot. Jefferson's still great. But I'm nervous about him. Jordan Addison drops down a tier as well, I believe. And TJ Hawkinson's becoming just basically droppable, unfortunately. And he's back in. He's chipping at the line of scrimmage more to help an offensive line that's not been great. So that's a lot of talking.
It is, because it's exactly the kind of question in fantasy football you need to be asking. You need to be looking for, I mean, there's a discrete skill here, or at least being willing to have your mind open to these things, where things could change significantly for any number of teams in the second half of the season. And what are some moves you can make to try to get out ahead of that? And the other one, Paul, is, and thank you for giving this to fantasy football, it's one of your many gifts to our fantasy football world, is Jordan Mason a sabotage drop?
Yeah, so let's define sabotage drop. I know you know that, and I love this term. Sabotage drop is when you drop a player with the intent that somebody else is going to pick that player up and damage their own team with him. And Jordan Mason's in this category. It sounds insane, but that could very well be the case. Let's look at the 3 games that Jordan Mason has played with Aaron Jones. And it ain't good. The first 2 games of the season before Jones ended up on IR, Jordan Mason had 23 yards and 23 yards. That's not, that is not where we want to go. No, I'm sorry. He had 68 yards and 30 yards in those 2 games. Then last week, he had a 3-yard game. Game script turned against Jordan Mason because he's not the pass catching back of the 2. And that's a concern. He did not score touchdowns in those games. And, I still think he's the designated goal line guy, but Jordan Mason is going to be on the wrong side of flex rankings, I think, coming into most weeks. Sabotage drop is not out of the question. You drop Jordan Mason, somebody else uses real fab equity or a high waiver wire priority to go get him. People think you're insane. And now they're the ones trying to figure out every week whether or not Jordan Mason, if they dare put Jordan Mason in their lineup.
Yeah, and I think sabotage drop as a strategy is something that deserves more examination, as it starts out. I think, the origin of sabotage drop is what also I go call spite drop, when you're just so frustrated with a player that you don't want to look at your roster and see that player on your roster anymore. And it doesn't matter if it's not the right move by fantasy football conventional wisdom, but like you said, it's damaging their team. And I want to focus on that and say it's not just clogging up a roster spot and using up bucks. That, in an ideal sabotage drop, it's the kind of player that stays right at the fringe of should I play them or not.
Yes.
And then you play them and you shoot yourself in the foot. So it has, like,
correct.
By definition, a sabotage drop player is a player that might induce you also to play that player. And who knows better how frustrating or potentially damaging that player could be for your lineup than the person who's been carrying them. All right, let's do a quick. Because since you invented sabotage drop, Paul, you invented that term. I want to just quick rapid fire throw out some names and say, how are you feeling about these guys as sabotage drops? All right.
Okay. All right.
Alvin Kamara.
Kamara's been horrible. He is not top 70 yards rushing. He hasn't scored since week 1. Devin Neal barely got on the field last week and got no carries, which shocked me. But I hate to be, I don't want to pound nails into Alvin Kamara's coffin for his career, right? I mean, he's a borderline Hall of Famer. But the other thing that's really frustrating with Kamara, he's not catching.
No.
And this is a Kellen Moore problem, I believe. He's averaging 18 receiving yards per game. That's it. Alvin Kamara. He doesn't look the same. Eye test doesn't look the same. I'm not saying Alvin Kamara will never have another good game. He's basically had none this year. I think there's a chance that he has crossed the Rubicon on his usefulness as an NFL starting running back. Would I sabotage drop him? Probably not just on volume, but I would absolutely have Devin Neal on my roster.
And I guess another condition we can add to this is, I mean, if you only have 2 viable fantasy running backs, then it's hard to sabotage drop a Jordan Mason or an Alvin Kamara because you're going to need them with buys coming up or injuries or things like that. But if these guys are your 4th running back or your 5th running back, or or like after your 2 best running backs, there are 3 that are about the same. This is where I start to say, why are you carrying a bunch of running backs like this? You should be swapping them out, at least one of them out for Samaje Perine or Blake Corum or Bashal Tutin.
Yes.
Or somebody that can, even Isaiah Davis, like somebody that could actually change your season. Because with somebody like Jordan Mason, just really quick, in my mind's eye, Paul, when I look at that, and the Minnesota schedule is absolutely an important part of the story. Because when I think about JJ McCarthy out there and Kevin O'Connell is giving us indications, and like you said, it's not ideal with the offensive line. Kevin O'Connell is giving us some indications like, oh, I wish I had a little bit more time to develop him before, build that foundation up, right? Detroit, Baltimore, Chicago, maybe not Chicago. That was his triumph game, right? Green Bay, Seattle, and Washington, maybe with Jaden Daniels, Dallas after that. Okay. Mm-hmm. I can just see these games where they fall behind by multiple scores and JJ McCarthy has to try. I mean, JJ McCarthy has to go out there and throw the punches and do the best he can. And just watching it week after week, like learning what Kevin O'Connell seems to be indicating to us. He's just not ready. And then at that point, you get in this situation where like, are you making it worse by continuing to put him out there? And just a bad spot. So, even if, and we know Kamara's already a starter, even if Aaron Jones misses time again, what would Jordan Mason be worth? Chuba Hubbard. Is Chuba Hubbard a sabotage drop?
He's the perfect example of a sabotage drop style player. And boy, did you really hit it on the head. And by the way, it doesn't have to be a running back. This can be any position.
Oh, I've got some wide receivers. I've got some wide receivers too.
So Chuba Hubbard, what you really hit on is who's more likely to get me to a championship? Is it Chuba Hubbard? Or is it a backup in a far better situation if anything were to happen to the starter? Is like Kenneth Gainwell, as one example off the top of my head, Kenneth Gainwell would end up, Blake Corum, I think you already mentioned, would be guys that would become potential league winners for you in a way that Chuba Hubbard can't. So you drop Chuba Hubbard, you drop Jordan Mason. We'll put a maybe on Alvin Kamara, and you let other people soak up roster spots, soak up hope. You put their emotional time into that player. They're like, what just happened? Alvin Kamara's on the waiver wire. Mm-hmm. Holy cow. And now they have a compulsion to play him when maybe they shouldn't. And you've damaged another roster and given yourself a pathway, freeing up a roster spot on somebody that could end up being a better player for you down the road.
Yeah, Emmanuel Wilson.
I love Emmanuel Wilson.
Amir Abdullah is, by all indications, the primary backup to Jonathan Taylor at this point. You want to be attached to that offense. I think there's even an argument for Tank Bigsby.
Yes, there is. If you give me a chance to talk about Tank,
go ahead, please.
I will.
Do it.
So, love Tank Bigsby in Jacksonville and was constantly frustrated they didn't give Tank more opportunities. And all he does when he does get runs is he's just shredding tacklers, and he can't catch, and that's used against him a lot. Don't care. He is a power runner with some wiggle, and he makes people miss, breaks tackles. I love Tank Bigsby. The fact that he has emerged as the backup behind Saquon Barkley, to me, is a great sign. He's better. He's better than AJ Dillon. He's better than Will Shipley. And again, I think there is a scenario where Tank Bigsby ends up being a league winner for you more realistically than Chuba Hubbard does or Jordan Mason does.
Yeah, Tony Pollard is another one. We don't need to discuss why, but you should be carrying Tyjae Spears over Tony Pollard at the very least. Okay, here's a couple of wide receiver sabotage drops.
All right,
Romeo, Doubs, and Matthew Golden.
Oh, I love it. I just wrote about how Christian Watson coming back just adds more cluster boink to this wide receiver room that we did not need. We still don't have any real clarity on a go-to receiver. Matthew Golden has not emerged as that player yet, and maybe won't this year, and maybe Golden's going to be great, but I don't think. And by the way, Jordan Reed's coming back fairly soon. I mean, his original timetable is starting to come up. So add in Watson, add in Reed, and these Packer receivers. Hadn't thought about them as sabotage drop candidates. Oh, that's juicy. Now, how about this, Sig?
Yeah.
Should you be trading those players?
Well, yeah, I mean, sure. I mean, these are guys like you try to throw them in a 2-for-1 to be like an upgrade. So, and what was in my head, I think you're picking up on my vibes, Paul, because what I really want to do with this show, it's great to have you here. I almost wonder, this is my delusions of grandeur. Like, did you coin sabotage drop like on the show? I certainly hadn't heard it until you said it, like on this show, because I think there's a layer to sabotage drop that we're peeling back where one of the fun things about fantasy football is risk taking. Right? You do it with your draft. You do it with you do it sometimes when you set your lineup. You do it with waiver wire pickups, but that's those are smaller doses of risk taking. Trades are where we really get the endorphins flowing, right? Trades are where
Yes.
but it's hard to make trades. We could do a whole series of shows about trades, the art of getting the trade done in fantasy football, and it's layers and layers to it, but it's hard to get trades done. And sabotage drop is a way to incorporate that risk taking, but it's not like a trade that you can blow up. It'll blow up in your face and you'll say, oh, that like ruined my season. Because the point is, we're saying like dropping Jordan Mason isn't going to ruin your season. Dropping Romeo Doubs, it's just not going to ruin your season. And then you get to watch like the chaos and mischief you create with this player. And maybe you even get to see them in the lineup against you in the playoffs, right? And then now you're sabotage,
satisfying,
right? And so sabotage drops is something I want to use this show and this platform today to amplify it as a way to engage with fantasy football for entertainment and putting your beliefs into action and then seeing what happens. I think absolutely. I mean, try to trade these guys. And this is why I also though get into like buy low and sell high, which I write every week. That's out the door now. Now it's buy high and sell low, where the better way to get out ahead of things is like, oh, if people are going to expect this to cease, it was going to slow down this trend, and it's actually just going to accelerate, right? So let's use that as a transition to the Chicago Bears offense, because much like Minnesota, we have a game this week. Okay, we have a game this week where Chicago plays, and Minnesota plays Detroit, which is like, it's weird because they don't have like their whole starting secondary, but at the same time, they just came off like one of their best defensive games of the season. But Cincinnati doesn't have a good defensive game. Like they don't have good defensive games. So if Chicago,
as proven last week,
right? So if Caleb Williams looks choppy, I mean, if the offense isn't able to, because Joe Flacco is going to force them to keep up with something. Now the questions get louder. Now because it's Tyson Bagent is in that Is it Max Brosmer? Am I saying it wrong? Because I know he's a Minnesota guy.
Yeah, it's Brosmer.
Brosmer. Yeah. Tyson Bagent is in that same situation, like we saw with Jacoby Brissett, right? Jacoby Brissett goes out there for Arizona, and we're like, geez, look at all this stuff in the offense that is just sitting there dormant, right? And people are wondering that about Tyson Bagent, right? I'm sure if JJ McCarthy struggles, people are going to wonder that about Brosmer and say, geez, we had a good with Carson Wentz, we didn't even realize it. So where is this headed with either a potential springboard or stumbling block for Caleb Williams this week?
It's been rough for Caleb Williams. I honestly, there were so many other parts with Chicago that had looked good in there when they won 4 straight games and they ended up losing last week. Um, the parts that are baffling on Williams, it's to me, it's the accuracy, the reads. He's sitting at a 62% completion rate. That puts him in the Bryce Young category of passer. And that I don't love that. There are elements. By the way, the blocking has been great. Both the pass blocking and the run blocking has been great. I mean, the time's been there, and then he misfires. And I think we've entered a territory with Caleb Williams where you start to ask yourself, if Rome Odunze is really good and DJ Moore is really good, and we think that there's all this surrounding talent, the offensive line is now good. I mean, we've run out of ways to defend Caleb Williams' play, and then sooner or later it comes down to him. And I feel like Ben Johnson's pulling a lot of right strings. So many parts of this offense look better. He's getting DeAndre Swift's having a career resurgence. Looks fantastic. They're using him in ways in space. They're using him laterally that I love. Zone blocking so much better for him. They're doing so many other things right. The fact that it hasn't come along yet for Caleb Williams to me is super troubling. And I know Packer fans are at wit's end with him at this point. I don't think I'm not hearing any calls for Bagent because I don't think anybody thinks that's a long-term solution for that team. But I think that the concern level right now is probably a bowel loosening level of existential dread for anybody that's invested in Caleb Williams, either as a fan or as a fantasy manager.
Yeah, the good news for, unlike Minnesota's schedule, Chicago after Cincinnati has the Giants, Minnesota, Pittsburgh. That'll help your confidence. Yep. Philadelphia, Green Bay, Cleveland, Green Bay. I mean, that's not great. And then San Francisco in week 17. It's not quite the murderer's row. I mean, in the sense that that Minnesota schedule is going to force the quarterback to make some plays to stay in games. And it was a little bit stunning last week that Chicago, their running game was doing so well. And Baltimore's run defense they were humiliated by the Lions back in week 3. And it seemed like the team, psychologically was struggling for a while. And the Bears, you would have thought, and the game never really got out of hand. I mean, they could have stuck with the run. Instead, Caleb Williams threw the ball 38 times. And I know that it's funny, behind the scenes at base camp, Matt Waldman is a Caleb Williams defender. And I think there's a lot of plays with bad outcomes for Caleb Williams where we can't necessarily put the blame right at Caleb Williams' feet, but there were some intentional grounding plays against the Ravens. And there were some plays that just looked like, and I'm not saying this is a death sentence for him, but if you can get him thinking about pressure, his process speeds up and his decision-making just gets kind of fractured. I mean, it just goes. And, we saw Sam Darnold have bouts with that in the past. And Sam Darnold, that's really the funny thing about this whole Minnesota quarterback thing, Paul. It's like,
oh, geez.
Sam Darnold, he wanted to stay there, right? Sam Darnold would have happily signed.
Well, yeah, he would have signed if the Vikings were committed to making him a starter.
Right.
Daniel Jones would have signed if the Vikings had committed to making him the starter. So, I mean, keep in mind, you had Darnold, who's in the MVP conversation right now. Daniel Jones is in the MVP conversation, and JJ McCarthy were in Minnesota at the end of the year. And then Aaron Rodgers wanted to come to Minnesota. And the Vikings have managed to thread the needle to what in this moment right now appears to have been the worst possible outcome. And in Minnesota, they had been so tired with paying Kirk's salary. They were like, we have to get a player. We got to get a quarterback on a rookie salary so we can spend money everywhere else, where the money they spent in free agency has all been on players who have been bad, hurt, ineffective. And so even that hasn't materialized as a bonus for Minnesota either.
Yeah, it's so wild, the NFL and all the alternate realities and how it's all interconnected, and how sometimes it's the bad decision that another team makes that saves you from a bad decision, or otherwise opens things up. I mean, I think we even see in hindsight when we're saying that a team was so brilliant for taking a player that they'll say, well, we actually wanted this guy who was a bust and he went the pick right before us. So we ended, so I mean, in fantasy football can be the same. I was actually thinking about this just as an aside, Paul, because I love all of the guests. I love all the people watching and listening. But I feel the most comfortable. Sorry, everybody. I feel the most comfortable when you and I are together. I feel like I can really relax.
Oh, thank you.
I was thinking about just how unfair fantasy football is. It's really, really unfair. It's funny because love of my life, Kate, again, she's doing this office league in this dentist office she works with. And she already has realized like a 10-team league is kind of trash because everybody has good players. So, it's like,
I love it.
yeah, she's already figured this out. Like, yeah, 12 teams is the ideal number of teams. But just watching it through somebody who's not as familiar with it as we are, it's senseless. It's totally senseless, right? Like, Marion Hampton was a terrible pick, and then Najee Harris gets hurt, and he's a great pick, and then he gets hurt, and then Kamani Vidal is actually the league winner, right? Let's talk about the Giants and Cam Skattebo. Like, I had so much remorse because in hindsight, my whole approach to fantasy football, I should have loved Cam Skattebo. I should have loved such a one-of-one kind of guy. And
Yeah.
I was a little enamored with Tyrone Tracy and how Brian Dable said, well, he's bigger, he's faster, he's quicker. And he was already ahead of schedule last year. He was a David Johnson wide receiver convert.
Right.
I thought, well, geez, a bigger, faster, quicker Tyrone Tracy sounds pretty good to me.
That does sound good.
And instead, really, it was that Cam Skattebo like juggernaut attitude that we should have loved. And for folks that drafted Cam Skattebo, they were getting all the rewards that they deserved in fantasy football, and then his foot comes off of his leg. So it's so unfair, right? Like but we carry on, and as it is in the NFL, so it is in fantasy football because the Giants also have to carry on, right? So what's your outlook for the Giants? Because this was such a fun story for fantasy football, such a fun story for football. Without their spirit animal, is it going to remain fun?
A couple of thoughts on Skattebo. One, we loved him in college because he was so much fun, and I let other people reshape my narrative on him, and I really have regret about that. So many people about Skattebo said, "Well, that stuff works at Division One football. That is not going to translate to the NFL. When he puts his helmet down and he's trying to stop an NFL linebacker, that's not working. He's going to get wrapped up at that point of tackle." And I listened to that too much, and I should have just trusted my eyes and my judgment. I'm like, this guy, there's nobody like him. There's nobody that
Yeah.
runs as he does since Mike Allstott, and that's worth something at any level of football. And I was optimistic about Tyrone Tracy because the buzz was positive. We thought he finished the season a little better than he had started the season, and he was doing that position conversion. I thought it was going to be a 1-2 punch. Tyrone Tracy till you got to the red zone. Red zone, you were going to go Cam Skattebo, and I thought that was a realistic possibility, and it turned out that was not correct. You talked about the frustrations of playing of doing what we do. On a macro level from last Sunday, Bijan Robinson
Oh
against the
yeah.
Dolphins.
And Christian
I mean,
McCaffrey, like,
right.
but let me just interject and say that's also something that happens in the NFL, right? Like, geez, I wish we could have faced that team whenever that guy was the quarterback. And the NFL teams also have to deal with bad schedule luck, or in this case, good schedule luck if you're facing Robinson or McCaffrey last week.
Yeah, right. So, if let me ask you this, because I thought about it on Sunday. If you had known somehow you had this uncanny notion that Bijan Robinson was sitting on a 12-yard game or
Right.
whatever he finished at, if you had somehow known with clairvoyance ahead of time, would you have ranked him where he actually finished, even if you knew it was coming? For whatever reason, you've got this insight and you really think this horrible game is coming for Bijan Robinson against the Dolphins. Would you have ranked him where you thought this horrible game was coming and indefensibly, right? There was nothing. Would you have ranked him at running back 60 or wherever he finished? Even if you knew it was coming, even because it was indefensible to have ranked him that low.
No, I would not. I'll tell you why, Paul. I'll tell you why. Number one, okay, because if I do that, then I'm revealing that I have access to some sort of clairvoyance, right? Because people are going to say there's no way People. So here's how it would go down. This is a really fun scenario. I love this. I love these counter. I spent half of my life in my brain doing what if counterfactual scenarios, right? So so Joe right away, like Joe, hey buddy, we noticed that Bijan Robinson's your number 38 running back. Jason has him in number 2, and Morrill has him in number 3, and I just wonder what's going on there, buddy. Well, Joe, I mean, after years of experimenting with different substances and reading holy books, I now have attained a second sight, and I can see that the dolphins are going to go from, speaking of floating on the water dead, they're gonna spring back to life. Kirk Cousins is done, and it's going to be a disaster. Bijan Robinson's even going to fumble, even an extra take away extra points in your leagues that punish for fumbles. And then it happens, and they're like, well, he's like, well, okay, but we've been working together for 20 years. I trust you, And then it happens. And then at that point, Paul, if I don't have a clairvoyant prediction every week that comes through, I'm done. I can get by on my wit and my personality, and now I'm promising clairvoyance.
Yes, you would. And if you didn't get them all right, every ranking right every week, then what?
Yeah.
How did you nail
That's the whole thing, right? I mean,
Robinson?
isn't that a perfect picture? Like, if you do something extraordinary, it can be this curse, not a blessing. Because then if you don't do it again, I think there was a Simpsons episode, like with Bart Simpson and his tagline, where it became like really, we all remember the Simpsons, those of us old in the 90s, when they were like a sensation, and everyone's like, come on, say it, do it. It's like, no. Like, I just want me like rambling like we do on the couch to be the thing that they say it, do it. But going back to the original question, the Giants. Are you changing? We talked about changing the Vikings' outlook, or at least being pessimistic. What's your outlook with the Giants now?
There's also little flowers for Algernon in this conversation as well, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
You get the Bijan ranking right, and then you can do it, but then when you can't, you have to live with
Yeah.
yourself knowing that
Well,
some part of you could do that.
right, and
And
it's
did do that.
gone, right? Like now, if I
It's
come
gone.
on, second sight, where are you? Because isn't that always the way it goes? You should be happy when you have those moments when it's like the mechanical bull. Don't think about getting thrown off. Think about that 3 seconds you were on it.
Giants, Jackson Dart. What I love about Jackson Dart, and God bless Brian Dable, there haven't been a lot of reasons for me to be happy with his decision making, but he's running his quarterback. Brian Dable has recognized that his best chance of career longevity is tied to the feet of Jackson Dart, and I also like the way he's onboarded Dart with shorter throws, higher percentage throws, and then he started stretching out the field more. Now he doesn't have field stretching receivers, unfortunately, but Wendell Robinson, whose entire career has been made up of 4-yard bubble screens prior to now, Brian Dable started running him downfield out of desperation. And it turns out Wendell Robinson can catch a ball downfield. And that's something they should have done earlier. You feel like it's going to be a bumpy ride with a lot of inconsistencies based on losing Skattebo and Neighbors, who are the two best parts of that offense. And that there's going to be moments where the Giants offense is going to be good enough that they can get some things done. But in totality, I'm pretty sour on this offense, minus Skattebo, minus Neighbors. Jackson Dart learning on the job. When you have to see teams, now Jackson Dart's got enough tape on field where defenses are starting to pick at him a little bit and start to figure out what he does. He'll have to try to overcome that learning curve that most rookie quarterbacks have got. But Giants will be a lot more intriguing next year. But I think it's going to be a very inconsistent season. Sig, how do you feel?
I'm more optimistic. Simply because, well, first of all, I think they picked the perfect week to draw San Francisco.
Yes.
I mean, San Francisco's defense looked like it needed a tourniquet last week against Houston, and I'm really fascinated with the idea. I'm into magical thinking that some of these offenses, it was just a bad defense, but the confidence and that light bulb going on, like, oh, this is how that play, this is just like practice. Okay, the play does work if we run it, can then have a residue of confidence and create some positive momentum for the Houston offense. It'll be interesting to watch them against Denver. And I think the Giants have that already. I mean, I think they have that confidence. I thought it was such a beautiful picture that Skattebo on the cart, Jackson Dart did the headbutt with him with Skattebo on the cart, which
Yes.
is such a I tell that tell, and they didn't stop fighting in that game. They didn't stop fighting.
No, they didn't quit. No.
No, and again, if, there was, like, a long touchdown, I don't know what it was, 60, 70, 80 yards to Darius Slayton that had one of the most nickel dime offensive pass interference calls. Like, he did shove the defender on his hip to create a little bit of separation, but it was, like, 10 yards before the catch point. Had 0. I think that, I know this is maybe for NFL officials a little nuanced, but if the interference, offensive or pass defensive, it doesn't affect the outcome, it probably shouldn't be called, And but if you tack that onto Dart's stats, Paul, and you say, geez, on a day that Skattebo got hurt, on a day that the Eagles smoked the Giants with their running game, Dart was still a good fantasy quarterback. So, and I mean, but to your point, Slayton is an interesting pickup to me. And Tracy, so here's where the rubber meets the road. If you have the number one waiver wire priority, or you looking at your wallet and you're like, do I spend every last dollar for Tyrone Tracy? Does your feelings about the Giants make you say, nah, maybe save your bullets, or you still say that's about as good as it's going to get for the rest of the season?
Well, part of the problem with Tracy is going to be touchdowns. Singletary's going to be the touchdown guy, I believe. And maybe I'll be proven wrong on that. I don't. It's a thin week on the waiver wire. Tracy is the obvious guy, but you got to decide what are you looking for on it? What's reasonable from Tyrone Tracy? I think he's 50 yards and 50 rushing yards, 20 receiving yards, and doesn't score most weeks. How helpful is that to you? And that can be helpful, right? So there's 10 PPR points in a bye week. That's not nothing, but how helpful is that? Because that, to me, that's about all we're going to get out of Tyrone Tracy, is that dozen total touches, maybe up to 15 touches a game. And if he's not going to get touchdown use, I don't know.
Yeah.
I want to believe in Tyrone Tracy, and I think he's an okay back. I don't like the situation, and I don't think he's going to get goal line use, and that worries me.
Yeah.
Caps is upside.
And it's fair that I was going through this on the waiver wire show earlier today. Like, you have to, like you said, know what you're looking for, because maybe Bam Knight is out there coming off of his bye.
I like him this week a
lot.
So
and again, is it that you need someone for this week? Is it you need depth? Is it that you're fine at running back, but you want upside? And depending on that, maybe that affects how much you're willing to spend for Tyrone Tracy. Okay, and I don't know why this is so depressing. All the topics are so depressing. I guess it's because the NFL. It's the marathon through a minefield, and it's whether we're talking about fantasy football or the NFL, or our lives, where, like, setbacks. There's a Thundercat song, "Heartbreak Setbacks," and what did Bukowski say? What matters the most is how you walk through the fire. Well, the Atlanta offense is in the fire right now, Paul. What are we doing here?
Did you get caught up in any of the Mooney?
Oh, I loved Mooney. It's my New Orleans colored glasses because it's Tulane. Because even when Mooney was with the Bears, I thought this guy's a number one receiver who just doesn't have a quarterback. And I feel like Mooney has a multi-dimensional game that we've never really got to see. And Miami was coming in just doing the zombie shuffle. And I said, plug Mooney in. This should be good. And it ends up Kirk Cousins. He has one foot in the grave. This is kind of like one of those, like, he and Andy Dalton, I think, let us know, like, it might be time to say goodbye.
Dalton was brutal. Oh, man. And so was Kirk, for that matter. Vikings did get that one correct on not paying Kirk in that 2 years ago. But this remains a Bijan offense. Obviously, they've managed to find their way to competency through Kyle Pitts, through London, who was getting targeted tons. Losing London at the last minute, I get the feeling the Falcons didn't see that coming based on the game plan that they ended up using. Kadarius Hodge oriented game plan. And London's just, you're losing 10 targets a game, and that really changed the whole face of that offense tragically. And we got this F- effort for the Falcons. But in totality, I still feel like I'm interested in Bijan. I'm interested in London. I don't think those guys, those are obviously, I'm very interested in Bijan. There's a little bit of guillotine charts talking right now, as these guys are both available in guillotine leagues this week.
Ooh, yeah.
Penix, I think Penix has looked good enough that I'm not worried about it. I'm not worried about this offense really repeating what just happened.
I hope you're right. Because unfortunately, whether we're talking about Minnesota, hopefully Bryce Young is back for Carolina. We're talking about Atlanta. We have injuries at quarterback, and then we have players at quarterback that are supposed to be ready and sometimes look ready and sometimes don't.
Right.
And it
Right.
skews all the calculus of who you trot out there. I mean, we saw this almost happen with the Jets this week, right? And I do wonder with Penix. I mean, just the Falcons have been so mercurial this year. I actually was able
Oh,
I was able to
yes.
save myself in this
Perfect word.
in the Survivor Bowl because I had three. It's pool genius doing this cool thing. And I like the idea of like taking our fantasy football or fantasy analysis angle and putting it on all the different kinds of pools that we do at the office. It's all about
Yes.
having stuff to do with your friends, right? So I had 3 entries and I lost one of them by putting it on Atlanta in week 3 when they played Carolina, when Carolina looked like one of the worst teams in the league for 2 weeks.
Yes.
And then they got
Yes.
smoked by Carolina 30-0.
30-0.
And last
Yeah.
week it looked like, well, geez, Atlanta should be able to handle Miami after how Miami played in Cleveland. I'm not going to fall for that again. And sure enough, again, it's not just losing, not just getting edged out, but just getting blown out. And the thing about Penix is in that game against Carolina, the game against San Francisco, which we can see now. That's the other thing, Paul. We saw what Houston did against San Francisco. Now, I know San Francisco had a few additional injuries in their defense in that game, but Penix had so much trouble moving the offense against San Francisco. Should we be more worried about that? Well, they're going up to New England this week. I'm in New Orleans, so I have to say 28-3. And we'll see. We'll see. I mean, the trajectory of these seasons, it's potentially a problem I think Drake London is the guy that is the most scary because, and I'm not saying he's a sabotage drop. You wouldn't drop him, but at a certain point, when you see how his production goes down when Mooney is out there, and then this
Yes.
isn't the most efficient pass offense. And like you said, on good afternoons, it's going to be a Bijan and Tyler Algier offense. Where are the breakout games for Drake London? And Drake London's funny because he and Garrett Wilson, like we watch them, we're like, that's what a number 1 receiver looks like. That guy should catch 100 balls. That guy should be a first-round pick in fantasy football. I'm getting him in the 2nd round. And every year we're like, he was worth like a 5th-round pick because his quarterback. Every year we want it to happen for these guys because we can see the ability. And then on the other hand, Jackson Smith and Jigba were like, well, what about Sam Darnold? I don't know. He's going to be a top 3 receiver. So, quarterbacks and some of the different ways that we feel reluctance about guys because of their quarterbacks. Another example of how fantasy football is totally unfair, by the way, Paul, is Cincinnati. Selling off all your Bengals assets when Joe Burrow went down was the right move. That was right. If you did that, you were smart. And now you're like going to rue it for the rest of your life.
Right.
Because
right.
Cleveland traded Joe Flacco, the perfect quarterback for what they have. And now that we've seen him do it against the Jets, I think we should expect this is going to remain a really strong, viable offense. So
I want to tell a quick story.
Please do.
That related to many of the things you just hit on. I was in I had one entry with 2 friends in the big Circa Survivor, 19,000 people, $19 million, that whole bit.
Mm-hmm.
And we rolled into this week with a fantastic entry in that the teams we had already chosen and used up had a 500 record.
Wow.
So we had hit on Raiders, we had hit on Browns.
Whoa.
So we had navigated this thing. We might have had the single most valuable entry. We roll into this week and there's 3 of us that co-own it. And my other 2 guys want Falcons and I don't. And I spend the week trying to lobby them not to take the Falcons. Don't take Falcons. Don't take Falcons. And I lost the bet. I lost out 2-1 and we took the Falcons. And I'm pretty salty about it, Sig. I'm watching the game and the Falcons are dead in the water. Like, a third of the way through the game, you already knew the Falcons weren't going to win. I'm saying nothing on the text string, saying nothing. And then we get to about the 3rd quarter and I said something that I now wish I had not said because I had been advocating for the Bengals. And in that moment, the Bengals were up by 15 points.
Yeah.
The Falcons were on their way to their loss. And I cocked off just a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And the better person would have stayed quiet and at least, gotten to the end of the game.
Right.
Bengals ended up losing. So I didn't, the team I wanted lost anyway in an improbable fashion as Justin Fields. And God bless Justin Fields for what he's been through.
Yes.
what a crazy ride for him. This has got to be as gratifying as any moment in his career to come back from that deficit in the fashion he did without Garrett Wilson on the field. I, it was, and by all accounts, really good dude. And so he's easy to root for. Yeah, it was that was my weekend sig.
Yeah, and then the gods don't like those things. The
Hmm.
gods don't like it whenever you um, assume an outcome. Look what happened to the Bengals in that game. I mean, that's what happened to the Bengals, right? I mean, they just like, we got this. And it was such an extraordinary play. The Brees Hall pass to Mason Taylor was such an extraordinary play. I mean, it was the kind of play that needed to be summoned up for the Jets to get a win this season. And it was beautiful because Brees Hall actually showed pocket presence. I mean, not pocket presence because he was scrambling, but he actually pump faked. I don't even know if it was a real pump fake, Paul. I think he was supposed to throw the ball at a certain
I
beat
think so
and
too.
nothing was there. So he
Right.
had to like stop his
Yes.
body, but the defense reacted to that. And then he had the presence of mind that some quarterbacks don't. That's when you can see the back of the defender's jersey, throw. It doesn't matter how good the coverage is. If the defender's backs to the quarterback, you have a chance. He trusted the rookie and made it happen. And it was the only good game. It was the only good game of the week. But yeah, by declaring it early, the gods do not like these things.
I got smote.
Yeah,
Is what
well,
happened
they
there.
and it's good to be humbled. I guess we should kind of be like in front of Old Testament God, be like, "Thank you for the smoting. Thank you for humbling me." Um, because, and I say that, Paul, because I was saying this to somebody a week or two ago. In some ways, this is like fantasy football, right? I feel confident that if any of us switched places with God or a God-like being, we would be pretty happy to go back to being a human being at the end of that. We'd be like, I'm just fine with being a human being. That's about enough for me. Go ahead.
Do you not want the omniscience or the omnipotence?
I don't want any of it. I don't want what comes with it. I don't want what comes with it, right? There is a great
The burden?
sure, or it's Spider-Man responsibility, and it's responsibility if you have a conscience or a soul, right? There's even on a basic level, but Duckman. You watched? I'm sure you have seen Duckman back in the day, right?
There is one episode of Duckman
Hmm.
that is one of the funniest things I've ever seen in my life, and I don't, because the show's now like 30 years old.
Yeah.
I couldn't tell you exactly which one it was, but I had archived it on
I
VHS.
had the same
I
thing.
was
I
like,
don't have the VHS tape anymore. I wonder if we're talking about the same episode, because there was an episode where a rift in the time-space continuum opens up, and Duckman is trying to figure out whether to go to his kids' like tuba recital or the opening of like a brand new adult bookstore, right? Grand opening, coming soon, coming soon. See, that gets past the censors. Um, and and he starts getting visited by future versions of himself. He's like, if I just knew whether I should go to the recital or go to the adult bookstore grand opening, and these future versions of himself get through the rift and tell him, like, one will come and say, go, you have to go, because if you go, you'll meet this person, you'll be a millionaire. And then another version comes and says, but then after you become a million, it's a Chinese farmer, right? Then after you become a millionaire, somebody comes, they come in and do a home invasion or whatever, and then it progresses to the point, Paul, where like if he even sits down in the chair, future versions of him are like, sit in the chair, don't sit in the chair, right? No matter
yes.
what, there's two versions of him telling him, do it, don't do it. And that's to me what like omnipotence would be like, I just think, or another one I can remember is when my wife, love of my life, Kate, we started planting milkweed for monarch butterflies, and she planted some milkweed, and the butterflies came and laid their eggs, and then they recovered in these caterpillars, and guess what, there's not enough milkweed for all the
Oh no.
caterpillars. So then we go and buy more milkweed, but guess what, they come and lay more eggs, and it's not enough milkweed. And then
Wow.
now we're like frantically going around to like plant stores and stuff, because now it's like, oh my gosh, and I remember turning to Kate in the middle of all that and saying, it's not easy being God, right? It's not easy.
Every pet owner has at some point looked at their pet and thought, oh, I would trade it. Your pets aren't weighed down by
Right?
expectations and need and um, you know, the clarity of thought to know that they should be doing more or
Yeah.
different than what they're doing. They're just, they're just happy in the moment.
Yeah.
And, that's yeah.
We can learn a lot from our
Yep.
pets. And I think there's been a ton of stuff written on cats about this in particular. And then I always think of it when I see animals that are missing a limb. Like they don't feel sorry for themselves. They're like, well, I got to get around with
Huh?
3 legs now.
Like that.
Okay,
Right.
that's what we do. And we get around here in the last 10 minutes. On the couch, we go off the rails, and there's some things. But Paul, I know one of the many things. I feel like we've covered so much ground off the rails in the time that you and I have been doing the show together, and it's
Yeah.
enough that we can do callbacks, right? And I want to do a callback to your love of vinyl, which we helped to forge on this show. Tell me something that you're
Yes.
listening to now, or tell me something that's inspiring you or otherwise from your vinyl collection.
I'm really glad you asked. Well, first, when I moved to Utah in the summer, we had a difficult, you're paying to move by the pound, and you're also trying to simplify, right? This is an opportunity when you're moving to go through everything you own and decide what do you keep and what do you part with. And I certainly could have afforded to move all my vinyl, but there was something in me that said, Sig,
Mhm.
and you're right, you've been with me the whole time. You helped introduce me to vinyl. I remember the first time. In fact, I'm going to back up for just a second. When I was first said I was going to buy a record player, I had this big plan and you laughed at me. It was okay. I'm going to buy one vinyl a month,
Mhm.
and then I'll spend the whole month prior
Right.
thinking about which one I'm going to buy, and then I'll weigh the pros and cons. It'll be a really fun process for that month about what the next month's vinyl will be. First trip to the record store, I bring home like 8 albums,
Sure.
right? So, that never materialized at all. And then I had more records than I needed and decided there was something cathartic to unloading the ones that I didn't play enough or didn't speak to me, that I had bought in haste or whatever. And so I sort of challenged myself to sell half my records on the move down, and it was hard. That was I'd go through, sort of evaluate mentally every single one of these. The easy thing would have been to do to just move them all. But I felt like there was something when you're uprooting your life and going from one place to another, both geographically, spiritually, you're leaving behind friends, you're hoping you make new friends, all the things that go into a large geographic move like I made, Minneapolis to Utah. It felt like the right thing to do was to do the same thing with my record collection, and I sold half of it back to my favorite local record store,
Mhm.
a small place that's got 2 or 3 different, not a chain kind of, record. I don't even know if there are chain record stores anymore. Um, and so that's the backstory. What I've been listening to lately, and this will not surprise you. I like bop
Oh
jazz.
yeah.
And my parents do as well. And they came down and visited me a week and a half ago for the first time. I felt bad about leaving them in Minneapolis as well. At their age, they're both in their 80s, and it was hard to leave them. And so to have them over was really important. And one of the things that they love, having grown up in the 50s and 60s, is that era of jazz, this hard bop jazz. So we were listening to Art
Oh.
Blakey, we were listening to Coltrane, we were listening to Horace Silver. Um, it was a lot of fun to just have it on in the background, knowing my parents remembered all that stuff. And there'd be a lot of songs. They'd be like, "Oh, I haven't heard this in forever." And we go look up the song. It's Wayne Shorter. Go
Oh.
look up the song,
Oh.
and that was really really nice. And one just side thing here,
Mhm.
Sig, you never get so old that you do not want the approval of your parents.
Oh, sure.
I'm in my 50s. I've had by any measure a terrific life, and it still meant so much to me to have my parents come down and say, "Oh, your home is so nice. This view is amazing." All the compliments from your parents. You never reach an age where that doesn't really really make you feel great and warm your heart to have the approval of your parents at any age.
Yeah, and that's, beautiful. I mean, it is kinda like, the picture where, like, someone's walking with God, they're like, "Did I do good?" Because if your parents say you're doing good, and I think it also is a testament to your parents and the relationship you have with your parents that is that meaningful for you. Although, in some ways, when you don't have a good relationship with your parents, one or both your parents, it makes it mean even more. Maybe that's why you didn't have a good
Mhm.
relationship with them. But there's so much good stuff there, Paul, and it's funny too because, with Noah, my 12-year-old, lots of great stuff on that journey. I could do so many father-son relationships and different things about that. But I was telling him, "We're gonna go through your closet and we're gonna clean out some of this stuff." "Why?"
Mhm.
And I said, "Well, some of it's like, you're not age appropriate anymore. Like, we don't need to hold on to everything, but we gotta make room for new, different stuff. Gotta make room
Yeah.
for new, different stuff." And I think that's what's great about why you did that. And having too much stuff, oh man, I still kind of, even though I'm not really an adult, like I would love to just have enough stuff to like fit in a car or less, maybe even a backpack. That sounds great. But when you're that stuff can weigh you down. And I love that you said that it's meaningful to you listening to that music with your parents because they lived it. One of the other things with Noah, it's great. He loves history. He's very curious intellectually. We're
Mm.
having a lot of fun. And at bedtime, you can't make this stuff up, Paul. At bedtime, like a week ago, he's like, "Hey, can you tell me some stories of what it was like to be a kid at the end of the Cold War?"
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow, what kid does that?
right?
That's such a thoughtful
And
question.
it's like, we lived through some extraordinary stuff too, you know? We were there for a lot of cool stuff. And it's neat. It's neat to have lived long enough to be like, wow, I've lived long enough to see the world change. I've lived long enough to see things happen and then see what happens
Mhm.
after that. But I do want to say, since you brought up jazz, because I'm a massive jazz.
Yes.
We could do hours and hours and hours and hours just about jazz, just about a subgenre of jazz. So it gives me an opportunity to say, well, first, I want to say, rest in peace to Nick Mangold, which is just too many players are dying too young. And he was that's the heart of some great Jets teams at a time, like when Jets fans want to remember those teams, remember him. But Jack DeJohnette, I think he passed yesterday. He transitioned, joined the ancestors yesterday. And Jack DeJohnette he's a truly singular drummer. He was the head of the percussion session on Bitches Brew, which to me is like, if
Wow.
I mean, if you don't know that, you should at least check it out to see if it's for you. But then he was also part of one of the most amazing jazz trios ever. It was just called the Trio. They're so fundamental that they're just called the Trio. It was like Gary Peacock and Keith Jarrett and Jack DeJohnette. Uh,
Oh, Keith Jarrett. Holy
Yes.
cow.
Yeah. So that trio played for years and years and years. There's like a Live at the Blue Note set of shows they did in '94 that's incredible. There's a whole the trio discography that is all amazing. And he was one of those interstitial players. He could play rock, he could play fusion, he could play like tribal, he could play the most amazing delicate jazz. And these people created all these connections that now, like in our time, like music can be genreless, it can just be expressive, and it doesn't have to be inside of a specific tradition. It was people like Jack DeJohnette with this soulful playing that showed the kinship between all these different traditions and how they can merge, one human family, right? And music definitely highlights that. And getting to do the show with dear friends that I love, like Paul and all of you out there that we love, because really we're just reflecting back at you, what you give us. You've given us this great opportunity to share what we have, but in the name of like actually paying the bills. So thank you. It's a great privilege to serve you folks always, that you persevere, that it's week 9 and you still care about fantasy football, or at least you care about hanging out with us. That means a lot to me because you're so classy.